What's up, everybody? Destin Laguerre here, and today I am talking with Rick Hoeg. Can I call you Rick?
You can.
All right, that's your name on Discord, so I was like, I think he's
Yeah.
okay with it.
I go
Uh,
by all derivations of Richard. Don't worry about it. Whatever you feel.
I'm really excited because I wanted to talk to somebody smarter than me, and I got you on the line. Let's be honest, I probably could have got most people on the line, but I wanted to talk about the Sony earnings call. And the Microsoft earnings call. And the main question I have is we saw big negative numbers for both companies, right? I feel like the Sony earnings call, the way everybody covered it was doom and gloom. And I'm looking at the numbers, and Dom's playing did a really great breakdown about like what he actually saw with it. And I wanted to talk to you about it also and just see what were your impressions? Because my takeaway after reading Dom's coverage and just looking at the numbers were it wasn't as bad as people made it seem. It was a correction. What's your take?
Like 0 and 10s on the internet, right? Like
Yeah.
we don't like middle of the road. First of all, Dom's playing is a fantastic Twitter follow. You all should follow him because he's doing this financial breakdown stuff all the time. But yeah, I think if you really look at it, it's always you can look at something really narrowly and you can look at it and say, wow, I wouldn't like to be minus 11% on hardware sales. That's not
Yeah.
awesome. But if you broaden the scope out a little bit and we really think about what happened over the last couple years, we know that some people had to stay home for long periods of time. And that video game entertainment proved to be something that, out of the many industries of our world, was one of the few that really enjoyed a pandemic, as it turns out. And so it got accelerated growth over the last couple of years, right? If you look at that, there's a big jump between 2019, 2020, 2021. And I think if we're being honest with ourselves, that was always going to give back some of that gain. Right. And so I think the goal for Microsoft and Sony is twofold right now. One is supply constraints. We see that writ large with Sony.
Mm-hmm.
But two is hold, right? You effectively got a number of years of financial advance kind of set forth in a much shorter period than you would have ordinarily needed to get to the numbers that you're seeing right now. And so if you can hold those are effectively just maintaining that accelerated growth. Even though it doesn't necessarily look great in the moment, if you compare where you're at right now to like 2019, 2018, you can see that both of these companies took a step up. And Microsoft, I think, is doing a pretty good job of holding, honestly, at those numbers. You don't want negative numbers, okay? We don't have to gild the lily there.
Well,
But
can I dive
yeah,
into that really quick? You said Microsoft's
please.
doing a pretty good job of holding. Do you think that's because they kind of went with a way where people can access games anywhere they possibly can, and Sony's like, we really want to lock down to the box, like with the PlayStation 4, and they've slowly but surely begun releasing on PC and seeing some significant returns using that strategy. So do you think that's why Microsoft has managed to hold better versus Sony? And do you think Sony will end up adjusting their strategy, especially with like the PC window in the near future?
I think Sony's definitely toying with reducing the PC window, right? Some of the noises we're getting out of the Last of Us remake are that they're not going to hold for the 2 years. We've seen traditionally a 2-year window from them. And you can excuse these kinds of things, right? Last of Us is just a remaster, so we can release it earlier than otherwise. And maybe that's okay. But when we're talking about this or other types of games, they might be setting the standard. And I think Sony's going to be reducing that window over the long term. As for the holds, I think Microsoft and Xbox had to come up with a different way that they were going to sell their product. Game Pass, software as a service, recurring revenue has proven to be that. I don't know whether that makes their actual numbers on the ground that much different for a year like this last one, but I do think it means that they aren't as beholden to things like, hey, a 10% reduction in hardware sales is worse if you're Sony than it is if you're Microsoft, because Microsoft isn't necessarily selling you the box. That's not the gateway, the mandate to actually get into their ecosystem anymore. So I do think that those numbers are a little bit more genteel for Microsoft than they might otherwise be for Sony. And again, I think Sony's got a great generation. I think they've got a great product. I think that most of what we're seeing on the Sony side of things is straight up supply constraints. I think they can sell every PlayStation 5 they can get to the shelves, and they're having a great deal of difficulty getting PlayStation 5s to the shelves. But when you see those reports about lowered game time, less expected engagement with these things, I do think that overall Sony's at a riskier position because they have that wall garden and they've built it up in this specific way. And so you will see a broader portfolio of availability for their games, would be my guess.
I think they've already started making those changes. We saw pretty important changes with how they adjusted the PlayStation Now merger into PlayStation Plus. I'm personally very happy to see that because I think Sony's offering better products to their consumers, and I personally think that's great, like having options like that. Do you think though, well, okay, there's a big topic today, so we should probably talk about, because there's the whole Activision thing also happening where Microsoft's still working on the Activision acquisition, and Sony today released some comments that I've been reading over, and I was translating myself, but basically they feel like there is no rival for a game. He says none of these developers, including developers like Rockstar, none of these developers could create a franchise to rival Activision's Call of Duty, which stands out as a gaming category in its own right. Some people have pointed out that this seems like a position of fear from Sony. Did you read these reports yet? What's your reaction?
So I can't read Portuguese, and they are in PDF form, so I can't easily translate them. So I did see the report on somebody that claims to have translated them. I will give that grain of salt, as I probably will in virtual legality later on. I'll probably cover this separately.
I'm going through and Google translating all the quotes myself, and like Reset Era has some stuff, but I want to read it for myself because there's some really interesting stuff about how they perceive the merger and WB, etc. So I can't wait to see your video.
Yeah, no, I have to go through some of that. I'll probably use the summary for the most part. But yeah, you say fear. I don't think it's fear. I would argue it's opportunism. So you get asked by the regulator, hey, how do you feel about this merger? This merger is taking place in a market you participate in between at least one rival and one producer in your market. And you can honestly say what Sony said, which is Call of Duty, top of the list every year. It is something special in the video game industry, and it has been since at least like the 360 era, right, where you're selling consoles with this game, and it is an important asset. Now, you're Sony, and you say, hey, we want to make sure that this stays multi-platform to the best of our ability. We don't want to lie to regulators. So you can go and you can tell the Brazilian authorities or the New Zealand authorities or whatever other authorities ask you these questions, hey, this is a big freaking deal. This is a big game. And nobody else is making a game as big as Call of Duty. Activision is practically the Call of Duty company in terms of the subsidiaries we think of. Obviously, King and Candy Crush is a big part of this negotiation and transaction as well. Blizzard maybe a little less so at this point in their history. But every other subsidiary has basically been converted to be making Call of Duty alone at Activision. And so you can go and you can tell these regulators, man, it sure would be a problem if we didn't have access to that game, regulators. And I don't think that that is fear. I think that is what you would expect a lawyer or a vice president of business or someone that is advising Sony Interactive Entertainment of what they can say in these circumstances to say. It's what I would tell them. If they were sitting across from me and they got this question packet, I would say, well, be honest, but emphasize how important Call of Duty is to your bottom line, because you want to encourage these folks to say, hey, maybe make sure that Call of Duty is multi-platform. So I don't view it, I'm a lawyer, right? I'm viewing it through the lens of what does this look like? How does this paperwork come in? What do I answer? And it's like, you want to answer truthfully? We don't want to lie to regulators. Never. But you can emphasize things like just how important it is to your ecosystem. So that's what I read when I see that.
So two follow-up questions there. One, Microsoft's already said Call of Duty plans to remain multi-platform. So
they did.
And Sony actually goes on in the interview, the last thing that I translated was they were saying that this could cause people to change their console preference, basically. I'm paraphrasing, but I think that's true. And I think that's where at least the online reaction has been like, this seems like a position of fear. I use that word fear, but I think you're right. I think this is opportunism because they're just like, here's how bad it could be for us. Oh no. Is there any basis of truth to what they're saying, or do you really think it's just opportunism? Like, would it really be that bad for Sony if this Activision deal goes through?
Possible. I mean, look, Microsoft isn't spending $70 billion for nothing. They are looking to compete more considerably in all the markets they currently participate in, at least the ones that touch Activision and Candy Crush and everything else. And so, yeah, they're looking to take more market share. No question at all. Is that a problem for Brazil? Is that a problem for New Zealand? Is that a problem for America or the EU? I'd argue probably not. You're talking about a pretty robust industry as it stands, with Nintendo and Microsoft and Sony all kind of jostling around. And then just in terms of the production of video games, you've got Sony, you've got Tencent, you've got Embracer increasing in size, all these various things. So yeah, Sony can go out there and say, we think this could hurt us. And antitrust, competition laws are not designed to say all competitors should survive, right? In fact, robust competition means you should be competing for that market share. This looks a lot like Microsoft competing for that market share. And I don't think Sony would argue that point too strongly necessarily, but they would say, hey, it would be great if Call of Duty could be on our system. The other thing I would add there is that video games now, historically, to the extent there's a history of video games, have historically had small companies get in there and take market unexpectedly, right? You got your PUBGs. Call of Duty wasn't the biggest thing in the world forever. You've got games that can burst onto the zeitgeist and really win over hearts and minds in a very short amount of time, and with not necessarily needing a Hollywood studio kind of backing. So I think the one thing that Microsoft has an advantage on this is, hey, look, video game companies are started all the time. Infinity Ward itself lost its people to Respawn, which is now part of EA. I mean, it's constant churn, which is a good thing in the video game market. But yes, Call of Duty's on top right now. Do we expect Call of Duty to be on top forever and ever? No. That's not how these things generally work. So I think you can answer that if you're Microsoft and say, new games are coming all the time. This isn't going to kill the market. And I think they would be right in saying so. But Sony's also right in saying, hey, we liked it when it was third party, y'all. So now it's not, or won't be.
Makes sense. Last question on the merger, and then we'll get back into the Sony Microsoft figures. So I'm wondering, so let's say the deal goes through, FTC approves it, all the regulatory branches approve it that need to across the world, and the Activision deal goes through. A year later, could Microsoft release like Call of Duty something and have it exclusive to their platform? Would they get in trouble for doing that?
Well, we don't know exactly what any kind of final arrangement would be. Right. So, I mean, the FTC doesn't approve deals. The STC can only block deals here in America. Various other regulators do approve the deals. But in so far as approving or allowing, regardless of what jurisdiction you're in, what we're talking about with limits are going to be put forth in contracts. We call them settlement agreements. We call them consent decrees. They're called a whole host of things across the world. But it would be saying something contractually, Microsoft, you're obligated to keep Call of Duty on the PlayStation system. And probably, if you're not dumb, when you're negotiating that consent decree, you say in parity of features and qualities across your two markets there. But we don't know what we don't know. And it's possible that Microsoft, which has been pounding its chest and crowing about how good of an entity it is and a good corporate citizen, might not have a consent decree or a settlement agreement. Like, that's what they're trying to do. Right. If you go and you look at some of the quotes that Microsoft has said about this transaction, said we don't need a consent decree. We're, only going to be the third highest revenue. This is only an aspect of things. It's one game that's really important in a console. It's one game that's really important in mobile, and one game that's really important in computers. And that's what we're really doing here. We don't need to agree to anything. Do I think the FTC is probably still going to have a consent decree of some time? Yes, especially after we see what they're doing with Meta. But
Beat Saber, watch out, everybody.
I rarely go, whole hog on my thumbnails, but I did call that Meta video, the FTC has lost its mind. So the FTC is now not just rattling its saber, but actually, thrusting it into various companies at this point in time, although it is still possible they just really hate Mark Zuckerberg. And so I think there'll probably be a consent decree of some kind. I think it will be probably something Microsoft can live with. And what will matter there, when you ask your question of what they can release between the two consoles, will matter as to what they agreed to. Right? You're not going to want to violate that, certainly not in year one. Things get a little dicey as things proceed from years after the transaction. But chances are you're not going to try to play with these kinds of things. Not the least of which, as a reason, is because there are going to be other companies that are going to be up for sale. Like, we know that in the next few years. Microsoft still wants to be eligible to potentially buy those if the price is right, and you don't do that by pissing off all the regulators. So they're going to be playing nice for a long period of time here because there is a lot of churn in the industry right now.
Oh, yeah. Everybody's being gobbled up. There's the rumors about Square Enix. That's a really good point. And I don't think Sony's done, and I don't think Microsoft's done either. I think after the Activision thing goes through, potentially in a year, we hear about another one. getting back to just general earnings and things like that, do you feel like the bubble is burst for gaming? Is that what we're seeing with these Q1 figures? Because people are like, Sony says people are going back to work, people are playing less, they have other entertainment options.
I think of a bubble bursting. I think of like a real reduction. What I think is that the rate of acceleration has slowed. What you're seeing as a negative number right now is still way above where it would have been if you just took a trend line from like the PS4 to the PS5 generation and you didn't have a home lockdown kind of scenario on a global basis. And so I don't think a bubble has burst. I think video gaming is very healthy. But I do think that the boom times, that gold rush, is over. And so I think they have to grapple with that. I think 2022 is kind of a bad year to extrapolate things from anyway, just like 2021 and 2020, because, I mean, honestly, we saw just a massive flight of product out of the second half of 2022 that led to a certain, I can't speak for everyone there, but a certain kind of psychological, man, it doesn't feel like much of anything is coming out this year. On Sony, on Microsoft, Nintendo just keeps churning away at things. Go play Xenoblade, folks.
Yeah.
But
300 hours.
Yeah, no, you get your time, you get your money's worth out of Xenoblade. So I think that what you are seeing is a combination of, yes, the end of the pandemic, they're right about that, but they're not really putting that much out there to play. And so I think we've seen a lot of people step away, look at other hobbies, look at other things. They'll be back when the products are back. And I don't think that when we're talking about these kind of minor negative numbers, it's a real risk or concern for these companies at all, honestly.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think we can agree that we're going to see a continued decline in 2022. And then 2023, I think things will sort of kick back up as there's a ton more releases. I will give one exception there with God of War Ragnarok. I think we're going to see some significant numbers posted there.
Yeah, and I'm really interested in Hogwarts Legacy. If it winds up coming out, it might be January. I mean, that time frame, wherever it winds up releasing, that's one of the highest watched videos from Sony's stuff. That's a really well-known third-party property. WB really needs it. So, I mean, I think they're going to be putting some muscle behind it. So I'm really curious about that one. Ragnarok's going to sell through the roof. We know this. I think things look.
Microsoft's kind of got nothing right now.
Microsoft has nothing. Microsoft had put all of its eggs in the Starfield basket, and the Starfield bunny skipped and danced and pranced into next year. Microsoft is actually doing rather well if you really think about what they've released this year with selling Game Pass and what I like to call like the indie festival of games. I really like my Game Pass because every week there's like 3 random indie games. And I check out things that I never would have played before. I like the Dusk game, which I can never get the right prepositional phrase for.
As Dusk Falls. I beat it
Thank
also.
you. As Dusk Falls.
Never would have touched that game.
Yeah. No, I would never would have played that. Yeah. Sleeper Cell, these various things that are on Game Pass that I wouldn't have otherwise played. I love that. That makes Game Pass worthwhile to me. But yeah, AAA. What is Microsoft released? I don't know. The Hot Wheels expansion.
Yeah, it's good. That's good. That's a good point. Yeah.
So it's a weird year. I find myself playing my backlog a little bit more, playing other things that didn't get enough attention from me before, devoting my life to Xenoblade, for the foreseeable future. But I don't think there's a real concern here. It's a very weird 3 years, and it's a very weird 3 years for what is essentially a top-end luxury good for at least the mid-market, right? We're not talking about yachts and islands and things, but video games you can get rid of earlier than food and shelter and things like that. So I'm not worried about it. I don't think they're worried about it. And I think that they are still kind of above where you would have projected them to be if you knew nothing about pandemic and you were projecting out 5 years ago.
Yeah, there's also the I lost my train of thought there. There was also the story about PlayStation potentially raising the price of PlayStation 5. This was asked during the earnings call. I know what I think about it. I said in the last video. What do you think?
I think there's no chance of them raising the price.
Way.
I assume that the precipitating event here is Meta losing its mind.
Yeah.
With the Quest line. So Meta was stupid. I made a video about Meta last week as well. So we're covering the topics that I'm interested in here, which is businesses being silly. But they're doing that for reasons beyond my ken. You would be shooting yourself in the absolute feet to do that right now. And I really don't know that anything has changed to their calculations from when they were making these decisions in the tail end of 2020, right?
Yeah.
So I don't see it. I can't imagine seeing it. I know some people took some of like the answers to the questions as like, oh, he didn't deny it. But I think in terms of legality, if you really understand the scenario there, is you're talking to investors. This is where you get sued. And so you have to be very, very careful about saying yes or no for a question you weren't necessarily expecting. It's a little bit odd to be like, are you thinking about raising the PlayStation 5 price? It's like, I'm sorry, what? so,
Yeah.
so you say we're not
Well,
prepared to talk about pricing at this time,
yeah.
right? Like
Well,
that's what his answer is.
that question comes because they also announced, because it's the Sony call, increase in price for a lot of their other electronics. So it's not like unfounded to ask about PlayStation in addition to all these other Blu-ray players and things that you're talking about raising the price on. So that's where it comes from. I do agree with you. It would be absolutely catastrophic for them. And they're already selling at a profit. There's many other ways that they could increase like profitability there, like getting them on the shelves. And I think what they're going to do, and let me know if you think there's any possibility of this happening. I think they're going to release a new SKU in 2-3 years, and that's where they increase the price. They sexy it up a bit, is what I said in the last video. You know, throw a little bit faster hard drive in there somehow, and I don't know, give it some more RAM, because it's already a really powerful box, right? Both of them
Both
are.
boxes are awesome.
Yeah, so like I think they come out with an improved console, maybe a slimmer one or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's one of Meta's big mistakes with their Quest line is that no, you have to throw on a new helmet strap or whatever, make it a new Quest somehow,
Yeah.
and then you can start talking about pricing. And they just said, no, that 2-year-old, that's just $100 more now. It's like, oh, that doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
that's not right. So yeah, I do think there will be a Pro line, especially on the Sony side. The Xbox side is slowly becoming an iPhone. So they'll just keep rolling out Xboxes, but there'll be a Pro of some kind, and then folks will go from there.
The gap between Sony and Xbox is closing. Fiscal year 2021, there was about a $5 billion gap between where the two ended up in terms of earning money. And the previous year, it was about a $9 billion gap. So the question I have for you is, do you see the gap between Sony and Xbox continue to narrow?
I think Xbox obviously has a better game plan than they did during the last generation. So the real question is like, where does that saturation point live? And Microsoft thinks they can sell a Game Pass to everybody and everybody's grandmother. I don't know whether I believe that or not, but I do think that they continue to succeed in what they failed at before. And Sony has maybe made a series of decisions that reasonable minds maybe can differ on, but I don't think are the strongest that they could have done. So I think that Microsoft, it's their generation in terms of thought leadership, and I would expect them to continue to narrow the gap. But Sony is a very popular brand for a reason, and the PlayStation 5 is not a bad box. You're not looking at a situation where you're massively underpowered compared to your competitor or anything like that. So I think once the logistics lines get in place, once things get a little bit moving a little bit faster and better, Sony will probably accelerate out to a healthy lead again. But Microsoft, I'm thrilled to say, is not shooting itself in the feet anymore.
Hopefully neither of them do. Honestly, I want both companies, because like PlayStation makes great games and Xbox is making, or at least buying companies
Three
that
awesome
make great
consoles.
games. Yeah.
Give me the awesome games.
Right.
Absolutely.
Question, you brought up the Last of Us remake earlier, and I am curious, do you think that the blanket $70 for every type of game on the market is to Sony's detriment at this point? Because fewer people are buying, and Dom's playing predicted that the reason, because like GT7 and Horizon Forbidden West came out literally a month or two before this new quarter, and they still saw a 15% decrease in monthly active users. Like, I believe it was 39% decrease in sales.
I know engagement. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I did see them
here. I know it's 39%. First party sales down 39%. And do you think part of that is the $70 price, the blanket $70 price point strategy? And like, a lot of those games haven't reduced in price yet.
Well, I mean, we obviously know that when you raise prices on the margins, you're reducing the supply of purchasers. But to me, it's still the games themselves, right? Like Gran
Mhm.
Turismo 7 is racing games are popular, but it's still a little bit more niche than God of War Ragnarok.
Yeah.
Horizon Forbidden West maybe didn't do as well as we thought it would, based on like launch attention. I love Forbidden West, just for the record.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that game this year. But I think what you're looking at is a situation where they didn't get people out of bed for those titles. And I don't really blame folks. It just hasn't been that kind of year.
Mhm.
So I think that Sony will get back to higher player engagement in the future. But it might just be one of those years. I don't know that Sony's doing anything wrong with their releases. It's just Horizon Forbidden West is very science fiction. It is very robot dinosaurs. It is very time travel-y.
Mhm.
And Gran Turismo is, it's a Japanese racing game. It's very specific in what you're going to be interested in. And I love both of them. I have them. I love both of them.
Yeah,
Gran Turismo.
I beat Gran Turismo 7's campaign, the cafe.
Oh no, I'm still working through the cafe.
Yeah, it's long.
I still have to
Yeah.
do some cafeing.
Mhm.
I got distracted by other things, as I often do.
Yeah.
But no, I think it would be a mistake to judge things too quickly or too broadly based on like these singular numbers. And again, we are coming off of a strange couple of years. I do agree with Sony on that.
My theory, crazy theory, those monthly active users down 15%. To me, that just says the Bungie deal makes a whole hell of a lot more sense. They want to make 10, what do they call them? Games of service type games,
Yeah, live
or
services.
like live services where you're encouraged to sign on regularly, which increases your monthly active users, which is going to look really good on their bottom end. And Bungie is one of my favorite developers. I think they've really figured out something special with the Destiny franchise, unlike most people have. What are your thoughts about that? Do you think that's going to end up paying off in dividends, or do you? The analyst? What was the analyst's name who said they overpaid?
Yeah, I mean
I think
that's
that was the
factor, right?
quote.
I mean,
Yeah.
yes, it depends on what you think they bought, right? So Destiny isn't worth that. What they're doing is they bought a brain trust for their live services games,
Mhm.
and I think it will pay off. I think Sony's pretty good at moving people around and getting that institutional knowledge spread out. The question is whether Bungie's going to be good at it. Bungie, historically notorious for not necessarily working awesomely with the head office, as it were, from Microsoft to Activision. Now we're going to give it a go with Sony. So we'll see how that goes. But I do think it'll pay off for them. Will it pay off for me? Will it pay off for Rick?
Yeah.
I don't know. If Sony becomes the all live services all the time company, I don't know how much I'm in love with it. Obviously it depends on the end products, but Sony's been basically the last primary bastion of high end single player action adventure type titles. And so it would be a shame from my perspective, selfishly, to see that go. But I understand that if the money lives in selling you skins to make you look like a banana, then you go and you go get that banana money. So I think they made a good decision. I think if Bungie was willing to sell for that, I think that makes sense. But I'm just not sure how that relationship is going to work, because certainly in the press release, and I said this when I covered it in whatever that was, January, it sounded to me like the most generous deal to the acquisition target that I had ever seen. So Bungie wants to make movies. Godspeed. Good luck to them. I hope they're better than Uncharted. And we'll see where it goes from there, because Sony wants to take that brain energy and, yeah, we'll make movies for you, of course, but we also want you to help us sell bananas.
Yeah, I honestly, it was one of the most exciting mergers for me. I'm really excited to see what Bungie can help Sony create in the games of service world, because I'm mostly happy with what they've managed to do with the Destiny franchise. So I'm like, oh great, we're gonna get more games that meant, like, we all know what happened with Anthem, right? So Bungie's like, well, here's the formula. Just go ahead, go do it. And hopefully we get, like, let's say 2 of them are mega hits. I'd be tremendously happy about that outcome.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about announcing 10, right? The assumption by Sony is not internally that they're all successes. The assumption is we buy the 10 lottery tickets and we hope 2 would be an excellent number for them. Because if you get a mega success kind of live services game, that's paying a lot of people's salaries.
Look at Final Fantasy 14.
Yeah, Final Fantasy 14 famously makes a lot of money. Destiny, makes a lot of money. Heck, Warframe makes a lot of money. Fortnite, obviously is
Yeah.
basically all Epic Games at this point. So I mean, yeah, it's a very lucrative type of thing, but at the same time, you can be Ubisoft that absolutely hurls its assets and resources at making live services games, and has a little trouble with them from time to time. No, what is Hyperscape? Where's that?
Oh
We don't know.
God, what are they even doing?
I'm a bigger fan of Ubisoft games than some, but it's still like you can see that they're interested in those kinds of things, and we'll see. Skull and Bones. Who knows?
Oh, yeah.
I'm very interested in that.
I'm
That's
wishy-washy on that one.
A Frankenstein monster of a design, just even from the intro video. So I'm very interested in seeing what pops out of that.
Rick, thank you so much for joining me today. I agree on Skull and Bones, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. This has been really fun. I always love having you on the show because you just have great angles on things, and I really encourage people to check out your videos. How do you recommend they get to your YouTube channel easiest, besides clicking the link in the description?
Sure. Well, click that link, absolutely, and like and subscribe over here, definitely. But yeah, Virtual Legality is the name of the main show. We now do a daily show, give or take, called Headlines and Hangouts, where we talk about all sorts of nonsense. But for the most part, the easiest way is Hoeg Law, HOEGLAW on YouTube, or Virtual Legality. Basically, any version of my name will get you to the channel at this point in time. And then follow me on Twitter at Hoeg Law as well, where I talk about other random things like Star Wars trailers and whatnot. So come on over, we'll have fun. We'll have a good chat, and I always appreciate the invite, Destin.
No problem. We're probably going to do this again in the future. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for watching. If you like my content, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell. Thank you to the members for supporting content like this being created. We're going to get out of here, but we'll see you for the next one. Bye for now, everybody.